The morning light in Redfield, Alabama, had a way of softening even the hardest corners of the town. It spilled through old oak branches, gilding the cracked sidewalks, the rusted stop signs, the brick houses that leaned with age. In one of those houses, paint peeling but porch spotless, Marcus Hale sat at the kitchen table, a coffee mug in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. The radio hummed low jazz in the background, a gentle conversation between trumpet and piano. Across from him, his 16-year-old daughter Lena hurried through a bowl of cereal, her curls half-tied, her backpack half-zipped. "You're going to make us late again," she teased without looking up. Marcus smiled, the corner of his mouth lifting beneath his trimmed beard. "Punctuality is a virtue," he said, "but breakfast is survival." Their mornings were rituals, quiet, intentional, and sacred. Marcus never rushed them. The world outside was already fast, loud, and unfair. Their little kitchen was where time slowed down enough for love to stretch its arms. He walked her to the car, an old silver sedan that had seen better days. The seats were worn, the steering wheel polished smooth from years of his hands gripping it. As they drove down the Tulane Highway, toward Lena's school, the town began to unfold around them. The gas station where farmers traded gossip, the whitewashed church with its leaning sign, the courthouse sitting proud at the center like a monument to a justice that rarely felt just. Marcus taught history at Redfield High. To his students, he was Mr. Hale, the teacher who turned lessons into stories, who talked about Harriet Tubman and Thurgood Marshall not as distant heroes, but as people who faced choices, hard ones, human ones. He taught with a calm authority, a voice that demanded attention without raising itself. But few of his students knew who he used to be. Years before teaching, Marcus had been a civil rights attorney in Montgomery. He'd spent a decade defending people who see, about restraint, justice, and the cost of silence. The next morning broke gray and heavy. The air carried the scent of rain, thick and metallic, pressing against the horizon. Marcus moved through his routine with quiet precision. Shower, coffee, toast, a glance through the window where the neighbor's flag flapped lazily in the wind. He buttoned his shirt, adjusted his tie, and called up the stairs. "Lena, 5 minutes." She came bounding down with her phone in hand, reading something off the screen. "Mr. Keller made the news again," she said, sliding into her seat at the kitchen table. "He pulled that college kid out of his car last night. They said he resisted, but the video—" Marcus cut her off gently. "Finish your breakfast." He'd heard the name Officer Trent Keller before. Everyone in Redfield had. Young, ambitious, and dangerously sure of himself, Keller represented a new breed of authority, polite in public, predatory in private. He wore his badge like armor and treated every stop like a war zone. The department called him efficient. The black residents of Redfield called him Killer Keller. Though never to his face, that be why the time Marcus dropped Lena at school, the clouds had broken into a fine mist. He told her he'd be late picking her up, teachers' meeting, then errands. She kissed his cheek and waved, her laughter carried away by the wind. The day at Redfield High passed slowly. Marcus lectured on the Reconstruction era, his voice calm, but layered with something heavier that his students couldn't name. Reconstruction wasn't about rebuilding walls, he told them, writing on the board. It was about rebuilding dignity. And that's always the hardest thing to restore when the final bell rang. He lingered behind, packing papers into his worn leather briefcase. A few students stayed to ask questions, one thanking him for a scholarship letter. Moments like that, small and sincere, were why he stayed. By dusk, Marcus was driving along County Route 47, the long stretch of 2. Stopped you before someone got hurt from his side mirror. Marcus saw the truck, that same truck, parked a few yards ahead, the driver leaning against the hood with arms folded, watching like an audience to his own show. "Officer," Marcus said quietly, "I'd like to request your supervisor." The air thickened. Keller's face hardened. "Step out of the vehicle." The rain came down harder now, drumming against the metal roof. Marcus unbuckled his seat belt slowly, opened the door, and stepped into the storm. He stood tall, rain soaking his shirt, eyes steady but unflinching. He could feel the camera phones from passing cars catching flashes of the scene, The calm man, the angry officer, the watching world. Keller ordered him to face the car. Marcus obeyed. Cold metal cuffs clicked around his wrists. The officer's voice carried over the rain. Reckless driving. Endangerment. You people never learn. Marcus said nothing. His silence was deliberate, his defense already beginning. Through the blur of rain and headlights, he caught one last glimpse of the truck driver smirking as the officer led him away. The world, once soft and familiar, had turned sharp again. The rain had slowed to a steady whisper by the time Marcus sat in the back of the squad car. The world outside blurred through the smeared glass, streetlights bending into streaks of gold and red. The cuffs bit into his wrists, not from pain, but from the quiet insult they carried. His heart beat slow, deliberate, each thud measured like a ticking clock inside a courtroom. He had been here before, on the other side of the glass, the other side of the accusation. But never as the accused. Officer Keller sat in the front seat, tapping something into his tablet. Occasionally, he looked into the rearview mirror, eyes sharp, cold. "You know," Keller said without turning, "you fit a description. Had a call earlier about a car matching yours. Black male, gray sedan, reckless driver." Marcus didn't answer. He knew the script. He knew how they. In the holding cell, the air was cold and smelled of bleach. The walls were gray, cracked and different. There were 2 benches and 1 flickering light that made time feel distorted. Marcus sat down, back straight, eyes on the floor. He thought of Lena. She'd be waiting at school, checking her phone, confused by his silence. The thought tightened something in his chest. He closed his eyes, breathing through the ache, reminding himself, stay calm, stay clear. Hours passed before anyone came. When the door finally opened, a young officer stepped in, nervous, uncertain. He held a clipboard, but didn't meet Marcus's eyes. "Your daughter's here," he murmured. "She's in the lobby with someone recording." The word hit like a spark. Recording. They led Marcus down the corridor, his wrists now free, but his dignity still bound. When he entered the lobby, he saw Lena standing there, phone raised, tears streaking her cheeks, but her hands steady. Beside her, a small crowd had gathered, people filming, whispering, watching. The officer behind the desk looked uncomfortable. "Miss, you can't. I have a right to record," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "My dad didn't do anything wrong." Marcus stepped toward her slowly, his expression calm, but his eyes saying everything a father could not say aloud. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "Put the phone down." But she didn't. The camera caught everything. The handcuffs, the officer's smirk, the quiet dignity in Marcus's face as he signed the paperwork they shoved in front of him. Later, outside the station, the night air wrapped around them heavy and damp. The lights from passing cars painted brief streaks of white across their faces. Marcus exhaled slowly, shoulders squared. Lena walked beside him, still clutching her phone. "They treated you like a criminal," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't even—" He stopped her gently, his hand resting on her shoulder. "What matters now is truth," he said. "Not anger, not noise, just truth." Behind them, Keller exited the building, talking with another officer. His laughter drifted across the parking lot. Marcus turned, meeting his eyes, steady, silent, unwavering. For a brief moment, Keller's grin faltered. By the time they reached their car, Lena's video had already begun spreading. Someone at the station had live-streamed part of the confrontation. Within hours, the internet would have its own version of the story. But for now, father and daughter sat in silence. The rain had stopped, and the windshield reflected the blurred neon of the police sign behind them. Marcus looked out at the empty road ahead, the same one that had carried him to this moment. "It's just a road," he whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, "but it always leads somewhere." He started the engine. The quiet hum filled the space between them. Outside, somewhere far down that same stretch of asphalt, the man in the truck was still driving, untouched, unseen, unbothered. But the story wasn't over. Not anymore. The following morning, the air felt different, dense, charged, as if the whole town was holding its breath. The Hale house stood in uneasy stillness. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the quiet. marking time that refused to move fast enough. Marcus sat at the kitchen table again, but this time there was no jazz playing, no easy rhythm between father and daughter. The coffee in his mug had gone cold. Lena sat across from him, scrolling through her phone, her face pale under the blue light. "It's everywhere," she whispered. "Dad, they're talking about you on Twitter, on TikTok. There's a video of Officer Keller with you in cuffs. People are saying it's another profiling case." Marcus didn't look up. His fingers rested lightly against the ceramic mug, his mind elsewhere, already mapping the terrain of what was coming. "Turn it off, Lena," he said quietly. "You need to go to school." "I'm not going anywhere," she shot back. "They humiliated you. You didn't do anything wrong." Her voice cracked, and that broke something inside him. He leaned forward, eyes meeting hers. "I need you to listen. Anger gives them what they want. We don't move with emotion. We move with reason. You understand?" She didn't respond, just wiped her tears, jaw tight. When she finally left for school, Marcus sat alone at the table, staring out the window as the sun began to rise. The town of Redfield was waking up, trucks on the road, sirens in the distance, the slow churn of small-town life pretending nothing had happened. But he knew better. The moment that video hit the internet, everything had changed. His phone buzzed. The number was familiar, one he hadn't seen in years. He hesitated before answering. "Marcus Hale," a warm, steady voice said. "It's Angela Reed." Angela, his old law partner, the one person who knew the version of him that Redfield never met. Back when he wore pressed suits instead of chalk-stained sleeves. Back when he walked into courtrooms with fire in his chest and the law in his hands. "I saw the video," she said. "You okay?" Marcus took a long breath. "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." He rubbed his forehead. "You ever feel like you left something behind because it stopped saving you?" Angela was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, you didn't leave it behind. You just stopped using it. Maybe it's time to pick it up again." He didn't answer, but her words lingered after the call ended, echoing like a slow revelation. Later that afternoon, Marcus returned to Redfield High. The principal, a cautious man named Mr. Dalton, met him at the door. "Marcus, maybe it's best if you take a few days off," he said, lowering his voice. "Until things calm down." Marcus smiled faintly. "Calm down," he repeated. "You think injustice ever calms down? It just gets quiet until someone records it. Thoughts in sight. You know how this town is." "I do," Marcus said. "That's why I came back." He turned and walked through the halls, the click of his shoes echoing in the still air. Students whispered when they saw him, some with sympathy, others with fear. One boy approached him near his classroom door, clutching a notebook. "Mr. Hale," he said, nervous, "my mom said she saw you on TV. She said you didn't deserve that." Marcus smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tell your mom I said thank you." That night, after Lena had gone to bed, Marcus pulled a box down from the top of his closet. Dust puffed into the air as he opened it. Inside lay pieces of his old life. Worn case files, yellowed notes, photographs of protests, and a leather-bound notebook with his initials embossed on the cover, MH. He opened it to the first page. Written in his neat, deliberate handwriting were 5 words he'd once lived by. "Justice demands patience, not permission." He flipped through pages filled with trial notes and quotes, closing arguments that once changed lives. He paused at one file, Jefferson versus County of Redfield. That case, the one that exposed the racial profiling patterns within the same department now run by Chief Blaine, the uncle of the truck driver who nearly ran him off the road. A bitter laugh escaped him, soft, incredulous. The system had circled back, same players, new faces. But this time, Marcus wasn't a defense attorney walking into battle for someone else. This time, he was the case, and he would not let it destroy him. He turned on his laptop, the glow lighting his face. One by one, he began pulling public records, searching for departmental reports, officer complaints, traffic stop data. Years of legal instinct, buried under years of quiet living, rose again like muscle memory. Outside, the crickets sang and the streetlights flickered. Inside, Marcus Hale's calm expression hid the steel sharpening behind it. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a strategist, an old fighter who'd traded fury for focus. In Redfield, Alabama, small, proud, and blind to its own rot, was about to remember who Marcus Hale really was. By sunrise, Redfield no longer felt like Redfield. The small southern town, where everyone once nodded politely in grocery store aisles and gossiped over coffee, was suddenly on fire with whispers, phone alerts, and fear disguised as curiosity. The video had spread far beyond Alabama overnight. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Screens across the country now replayed the same grainy scene on loop, a middle-aged black man handcuffed standing calmly in the rain, a white officer's hand gripping his arm, a teenage girl's voice breaking as she cried, "He didn't do anything." Cable news stations ran it side by side with body cam footage from similar stops, names and faces scrolling like ghosts across the bottom of the screen. But it wasn't just another headline. There was something in Marcus Hale's composure that unsettled people. He didn't shout, didn't plead, didn't break. He just stood there, soaked and silent, looking directly into the camera. That silence said everything. By mid-morning, journalists had started calling. Local channels set up outside Redfield High. Students arrived to find reporters asking them about the teacher in the viral video. Some defended him proudly. Others whispered that maybe he should have just complied. The tension that had always hummed beneath Redfield's politeness was finally audible, raw, and unfiltered. At the police station, Chief Blaine stood before cameras, offering his version. The department takes all accusations seriously. Officer Keller followed proper protocol. We asked the community not to jump to conclusions. But even as he spoke, Keller's smurf from the video was being dissected frame by frame online. The internet had a memory longer than the department's denials. At Redfield High, Marcus walked through the hallways with quiet purpose. Some students looked at him with awe, others with confusion, a few with fear. His colleagues avoided eye contact, torn between solidarity and self-preservation. The principal stopped him near the teacher's lounge, voice hushed. "They've suspended you with pay," he said, looking away, "until the investigation concludes." Marcus just nodded. I expected that. When he stepped outside, a crowd had gathered, reporters, students, parents, and curious onlookers. Microphones thrust forward, voices overlapping. "Mr. Hale, do you believe this was racial profiling? Will you press charges? Are you planning Liga?" He held up his hand for silence. The noise dimmed slightly. Cameras focused in, shutters clicking like heartbeat rhythms. Marcus spoke softly, his voice steady, deliberate. "I believe in truth, and I believe in systems that have forgotten what truth sounds like. I'll say more when the time is right. For now, I'm asking for peace." His words rippled outward, not fiery enough for headlines, but powerful enough to land like a seed in people's minds. Later that afternoon, the support began to take shape. Former students organized a rally outside the courthouse, carrying handmade signs, "Justice for Mr. Hale." Educators deserve respect. Truth is not a threat. Local churches released statements of solidarity. The NAACP chapter from Birmingham sent representatives. And among the crowd was Maya Trent, a civil rights journalist and longtime friend of Marcus's from his attorney days. She approached him quietly after the rally, notebook in hand. "Still calm in the middle of chaos," she said with a small smile. He smiled faintly back. "Old habits die slow." "I'm doing a feature," she said. "People need to know who you are, what this department has been hiding." He hesitated. "You really think they'll print it?" "I'll make them," she said simply. That evening, Marcus's name began trending again, this time not as a victim, but as a man with a story. Old court records resurfaced. Jefferson versus County of Redfield, the case where a young lawyer had once forced the same police department to settle for unlawful detentions. Photos of Marcus from those days began circulating. Sharp suit, confident smile, the look of a man who once believed law could fix what history had broken. The town split clean down the middle. Some saw him as a symbol, a quiet man standing tall against injustice. Others saw him as a threat to their comfort, a reminder of what they'd long chosen not to see. Businesses debated whether to post support signs. Church sermons turned political. Meanwhile, Lena's video continued to grow. She watched the view count climb into the millions, the comments flooding with love, rage, solidarity. Her phone buzzed nonstop, but none of it felt real. She looked at her father across the living room, sitting on the couch, laptop open, eyes heavy with thought. "Are we safe?" she asked quietly. He looked up from the screen. Safety's a story they sell to make people feel small. We're not small. Outside, the night hummed with the sound of distant cars and restless hearts. The glow of camera lights flickered through the blinds. Marcus turned his gaze toward the window, seeing his own reflection, half shadow, half light. "They're watching now," he murmured. "So let's give them something worth seeing." He wasn't planning to play defense anymore. The time for calm was ending. The time for clarity had begun. By the third day, Redfield wasn't just a town. It had become a map of battle lines. Every diner booth, church pew, and porch conversation carried an opinion about Marcus Hale. Some called him a troublemaker, others a hero. But Marcus didn't have time for either label. He was already working quietly, methodically, in the same way he once built legal cases years ago. The suspension had freed him from the classroom, but not from purpose. His kitchen table transformed into a war room, files stacked like barricades, a laptop glowing under the dim light of a single lamp, old legal pads filled with names and timelines. Lena sat nearby, headphones on, trying to focus on schoolwork, but she kept glancing over at him, watching the man she thought she knew shift into someone entirely different. "Dad," she said softly, "you used to do this before, didn't you?" He paused. "Before teaching?" "Yeah." "What happened?" He looked up from his papers, a faint smile crossing his tired face. "Sometimes you get tired of fighting. You think maybe you can do more good by teaching others to think for themselves." His eyes hardened slightly. "But sometimes the fight finds you again." That night, he made a call, one he hadn't made in years. "Elaine, it's Marcus Hale." On the other end, the voice of Elaine Rucker, a civil rights attorney out of Birmingham, came through, low and sharp. "Well, I'll be damned. You still have my number. I saw the video. You all right? I'm Fine. But this isn't just about me. I want to go after the department, the profiling, the falsified stop records, the harassment that's been going on for years." There was silence, then a sigh. "You sure you're ready for that? They'll dig into your past, into your family. I've spent my life teaching kids how to face history. It's time I face mine." By morning, Elaine was in Redfield. She and Marcus set up in his small living room. Laptops open, coffee cups multiplying. Maya Trent, the journalist, joined them soon after, bringing printed screenshots, statements, even anonymous emails from officers inside the department. One message, and signed, read, "They've been doing this for years. They target black drivers on Highway 17 after dark, told to keep the streets clean." Maya placed it on the table like a confession. "This," Marcus said, tapping the page, "is the start." Elaine nodded. "We'll build a case on pattern practice. Racial profiling. Misuse of authority. We'll subpoena the dash cam footage. They'll try to destroy it before we get it," Maya warned. "They won't get the chance," Marcus said, already typing. His fingers moved fast, methodical, the rhythm of someone who had spent nights like this before, chasing justice through paperwork and persistence. Days blurred into nights. Files came in from whistleblowers, testimonies from townsfolk who had been stopped and searched without cause, black teenagers who'd been frisked walking home from football practice. Marcus sat with each of them, calm and patient, listening. He took notes not just on their words, but on their silences, the parts they'd never told anyone. One evening, Lena came in holding a printed photo, one of Marcus in a courtroom years ago, mid-argument, fire in his eyes. "You look different here," she said. He smiled gently. "That's because back then, I still believed justice didn't need an audience." Now, he had one. By the end of the week, Marcus and Elaine filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Redfield Police Department and Officer Keller. It was more than a legal act. It was a public declaration. Within hours, it was headline news. Former civil rights attorney turned teacher sues police department after racial profiling incident. The department scrambled to respond. Chief Blaine called an emergency press conference, attempting to cast Marcus as a disgruntled ex-lawyer seeking attention. But before the day was over, Maya released an expose, The Pattern of Silence in Redfield, featuring leaked emails showing coordinated efforts to falsify stop data. The story detonated across social media. Suddenly, national organizations reached out. Lawyers offered pro bono help. Civil rights leaders demanded a federal investigation. Still, Marcus remained composed. When reporters surrounded his house, he simply said, "This isn't revenge. It's responsibility." Late one night, as rain began to fall again, he stood on his porch, the same road where everything had started. Police cruisers still passed occasionally, their lights flickering in the dark like threats. But Marcus didn't flinch. Lena came out, wrapping her arms around him. "You think we can win?" she whispered. He looked out toward the road, empty now, glistening under the streetlight. "We already are," he said softly. "We made them look. That's the first step to change." And in that moment, the thunder rolled distant but deep, not ominous this time, but cleansing like the sound of a storm finally washing something old away. Marcus closed his eyes and exhaled. The next battle, the public one, was coming. But now, for the first time in years, he felt ready. Would you like me to continue with Part 7? The climactic showdown, where the truth is revealed in a high-stakes public confrontation, e.g., courtroom or the town hall scene. The courthouse steps looked different that morning. The air carried the sharp chill of early spring, but beneath it, something electric pulsed, the sound of a town holding its breath. Reporters lined the barricades, microphones poised. Protesters filled the square, their signs rising like a sea of testimony. "Truth has no color. Justice from Marcus Hale. We see you, Redfield, PD." Marcus stepped from the black sedan in a dark suit, the same one he'd worn the day he won his first civil rights case years ago. It didn't quite fit like it used to, but it carried the same quiet authority. Lena walked beside him, clutching his arm, her face set with the kind of courage that comes from watching someone you love refuse to bend. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted. Local families, activists, police officers, even teachers from Redfield High had come to witness what many whispered would be the day everything changed. At the front, Officer Keller sat stiffly in his uniform, jaw locked, his attorney whispering something that made him nod, but not blink. Judge Alden, an older white man with a reputation for keeping order, presided from the bench. His gavel came down hard. "We're here in a matter of Hale versus Redfield Police Department," he said. "Proceed." Elaine Rucker rose first. Her tone was cool steel, calm and cutting. "Your Honor, this is not a case about a single traffic stop. It's about a system built on intimidation, one that treats dignity as a privilege, not a right." As she spoke, the screens flickered to life behind her. Body cam footage, street recordings, data charts. Each clip told another story. A driver pulled over for fitting a description, a teen detained for walking after dark. And then, the moment everyone knew, Marcus S. He stood slowly, adjusting his glasses. The room went still. His voice, though steady, carried weight like thunder behind mountains. "I was driving home. I signaled, slowed, and moved into the next lane. The officer cut across, nearly clipped me, then pulled me over for reckless driving. I didn't argue. I complied. And still, I was treated as a threat, not a man." He paused, his gaze landing on Keller. "I've taught young people for 20 years to stay calm when the world tries to shake them. But that night, I realized something: calm doesn't protect us. It only exposes who we are when the system refuses to see it." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Some nodded, others looked down. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, but didn't interrupt. Elaine played the next clip, dashcam footage obtained through subpoena. It showed not just the stop, but the conversation afterward. Keller bragging to another officer that he'd put that guy in his place. The courtroom gasped. Even the judge's expression shifted slightly, the thin line of authority faltering for just a moment. Elaine stepped forward. "Your Honor, this department didn't just fail one man, it created a policy of profiling." Officer Keller's words aren't isolated. They're the language of culture, one this town has ignored for decades. The defense tried to object, but the noise from the gallery overpowered them. People weren't silent anymore. Then, Maya Trent stood up from the press row, holding a manila folder. "Your Honor, permission to submit additional evidence to the court record, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests." The judge hesitated, then nodded. She handed it to the bailiff. Inside were internal memos, signed by Chief Blaine himself, outlining a night patrol initiative targeting high-risk demographics. It was dated just 6 months before Marcus's arrest. The room erupted. Reporters shot to their feet, cameras flashing like lightning. Judge Alden slammed his gavel. "Order! Order in this court." But even as he spoke, it was clear order had already left. Truth had entered in its place. Marcus sat quietly, watching as Blaine's face drained of color. For years, that man had represented authority, the law, the image of control. Now he looked small, exposed, not by anger but by evidence. When the verdict came hours later, the courtroom fell silent. The judge's voice carried the weight of reluctant justice. "This court finds the Redfield Police Department in violation of civil rights statutes regarding racial profiling and unlawful detainment. Officer Keller is hereby terminated, and an independent federal review will be conducted into departmental practices." There was no applause at first, just stunned quiet. Then, slowly, a few claps. Then more. The sound grew, wave after wave, until the entire courtroom rose. Some cried. Some shouted amen. Marcus didn't raise his hands. He simply bowed his head. Tears welled in his eyes, but didn't fall. Lena gripped his arm tighter, whispering, "You did it, Dad." He shook his head softly. "We did it." Outside, the sky had cleared. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the courthouse steps. Cameras swarmed. Microphones reached. Voices demanded statements. Marcus paused at the top of the stairs, looking over the crowd, students, neighbors, strangers. He raised his voice just enough to carry. This was never about one stop on one road. It was about every road Black people are forced to travel with fear in their rearview mirror. Today, we showed what happens when you don't flinch, when you fight with truth, not anger. That's how change starts. The crowd roared. But Marcus simply turned, took Lena's hand, and began walking down the steps, calm, steady, unhurried, like a man who'd finally come full circle. Weeks passed, and Redfield began to change. Not overnight, not completely, but visibly, like the slow thaw after a hard winter. The courthouse square no longer buzzed with outrage. Now it hummed with rebuilding. New policies were being drafted. Civil rights observers had taken offices downtown. For the first time in decades, the department's walls, both literal and institutional, felt porous, like sunlight might actually seep through. But for Marcus Hale, victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like silence, the kind that comes after a long storm. Heavy, uncertain, and sacred. He still woke early, long before dawn, making coffee the same way he always had. The house felt different now. Quieter, emptier, as though it too was catching its breath. Lena had gone back to school, but she called every night. Sometimes they didn't talk about the case at all, just the ordinary things. Homework, college plans, what she'd cook when she came home for the weekend. In those moments, Marcus realized what all the noise had almost drowned out. He was still a father first. On a rainy afternoon, he returned to his classroom for the first time since his suspension was lifted. The hallway smelled of chalk and old wood polish. Students looked up from their desks as he entered, some smiling shyly, some clapping quietly until the room filled with soft applause. Marcus smiled. "All right, that's enough," he said, voice low but warm. "We got history to make up for, both kinds." As the class settled, he glanced at. He turned to them. "This," he said, "isn't a story about what happened to me. It's about what happens when people stop pretending not to see. Every generation gets tested, and every generation decides whether silence will keep winning." Outside the window, sunlight broke through gray clouds, the same road visible in the distance where it had all begun. After class, he walked out into the schoolyard, pausing beneath an old oak tree. Maya Trent was waiting there, notebook in hand. She'd been following the aftermath, writing a feature titled The Road Back to Redfield. "You still don't like interviews?" Huh, she teased gently. Marcus smiled. "Never did. Truth doesn't need a spotlight, just a place to stand." She nodded, then lowered her pen. "They're talking about naming that stretch of Highway 17 after you." He looked out toward it, the same curve of road where humiliation had tried to take root and instead became resistance. "Don't name it after me," he said quietly. "Name it for everyone who ever got stopped there and kept their hands visible, hoping to stay alive. That's the story worth remembering." For a moment, the only sound was wind through the branches, a kind of hymn, low and steady. That evening, Marcus drove that same road one last time before heading home. The asphalt shimmered in the dying light. Every mile held memory, headlights and rain, the sound of his daughter's frightened breath, the flash of blue and red that had once felt like judgment. But now it was just light. He pulled over where it had happened. The sky was open, endless. He stepped out of the car, closing the door softly behind him, hands resting on the hood as if greeting an old wound. The air smelled of wet earth and spring grass. He stood there a long while, breathing in the quiet. No cameras, no lawyers, no crowd, just a man, finally unburdened. In the distance, another car passed, slowing slightly as the driver recognized him. A young black man leaned out the window, raising a fist, not in anger, but in gratitude. Marcus lifted his hand in return, a faint smile breaking through. When the taillights faded, he whispered, almost to himself, "Keep going." Then he turned toward his car, headlights cutting through the dusk, and drove on, steady, certain, the road stretching wide before him. The camera of the world, if there were one, would have pulled back then, showing the curve of the highway, the soft orange lights spilling across the horizon, the lone figure in motion beneath it. Because justice, like that road, wasn't a destination. It was something you had to keep traveling, even when the world tried to make you stop. And as the credits of his life's longest fight rolled quietly in the background, Marcus Hale, teacher, father, soldier of truth, kept driving into the open light.